Good evening and welcome to Raconteurs News, bringing you untwisted, unsweetened news on raconteursnews.com. My name's Andy Young, and as always, I'm joined by Jason Holmes. Good evening, Jason.
Good evening, Andy. How are you, my friend?
Oh, I'm good, mate. I've had a good week. Well, a few ups and downs, as always. This emotional roller coaster we're all on, but all pretty good in the hood, and I'm looking forward to tonight because it's back to my favourite subject.
Yeah, this is it's the last show of the week in what's been a busy week, and what a great one we've got as well. It's your favourite subject. It's something that's quite close to my heart. So I think we should get on with it. Why don't you introduce our guest for this evening?
Yeah, well, our guest tonight needs no introduction from me, really. He's one of the top figures in ufology in the UK, and it's Gary Heseltine. Good evening, Gary.
Good evening, Andy. Good evening, Jason.
Good evening, Gary.
Hiya, mate. So you've got your conference in Watford coming up very soon, but what else is on your agenda at the minute, Gary?
Well, this year I've promised myself that I will finally write the book about police officers and the Profos Police Database. It's something that I've probably should have done before now.
Mm-hmm.
But realistically, when you become an editor of a magazine, I think you kind of lose time very quickly and you end up doing other things. And one of the curses of being an editor is that you probably never write the book that you should write. And I remember speaking to this subject with AJ Javad, who from Brazil, who runs the Brazilian UFO magazine. Mm-hmm. And I said, look, you should have a book out there, especially with his research into Amazon sightings, which he's been doing for about 15 years. And he said, I just never seem to get the time. And I said, well, let's have a bet. Let's make this year the date when we actually finally get a book out ourselves. So I'm not sure whether he's doing his book, but I'm about 190 pages into mine, and I'm hoping that by October it'll be pretty much done. So I am making a concerted effort to get it done, because it should be out there, because well over 1,000 police officers and over 500 cases. We're back to 1901. I think it makes for a very interesting book in terms of ufology anyway.
Yeah, I'll certainly be having a read of that. So, yeah, AJ, lovely guy. I just wish he could have understood my weird accent so I could have interviewed him.
Well, yeah. Well, I wish I could speak Portuguese as well as he speaks English, put it that way.
Yeah, well, I said to him, can we do an interview when we were sat in the canteen at Holmfirth last year? And he said, oh, sorry, I don't understand your English. I understand Gary, and he understood Larry quite well, I think, but he reckoned he didn't understand us well enough. So I just...
Oh, right.
I
didn't know that.
I just wish I'd got a picture of him sat there eating those flying saucer sweets, though. That was classic, that was.
No, AJ's a good guy and one of the top people in the world. And I think the audience really warmed to him at the conference. But yeah, so I'm doing the book, and I'm also obviously doing the magazine. And by way of expanding the magazine, is that I've agreed to do another conference, which is a Southern UK conference. A lot of people have said to me, "Are you going to do any conferences down south for the magazine?" And last year I did there was a one-day conference there where I was on. I think Ben Emlyn Jones was on, and a couple of other people. But basically what I didn't realise was that it was effectively in a stately home. And High Elms Manor, where it is, the home of the Watford Academy, is an absolutely beautiful place with its own country grounds, as you'd expect from a kind of stately manor, and it's a delightful venue, and that's where the idea came from. I was kind of looking for a southern venue, and what's unusual is the people own the building, so you haven't got to rent it. You know, they actually live there, so that was a bit different. Off-road parking, great on country grounds. So it's a perfect venue, and we're probably approaching 50% of the ticket sales with another month to go, but they're well used to having a lot of people turn up on the day. I would urge people to, because it's the magazine that's organising it, is to purchase online through the magazine website, UFOtruthmagazine.co.uk, to make sure you get a ticket, because if there is a sudden run on the tickets online, then the people who are leaving it late are thinking that they're going to get in on the day, they might not. So it's a little bit different this time from what they're used to doing. So I would urge you to book online and make sure you get your ticket. But yeah, I'm looking forward to it. There's myself, Robinson, Alan Foster, and Ben and Jones. So it's a good lineup. It's a one-day conference. I think the doors will open about 10 o'clock. The lectures will begin 11ish, and we'll probably go through till about 7:30. And hopefully the weather will be nice so people can get out in the garden for a tea break. And I'm looking forward to it. It's a lovely venue, so I'm really looking forward to it.
Yeah.
Well, Andy's always up for speaking. He's just popped his public speaking cherry. So perhaps, if in future, if you want to get a bit of a biography of a year in the life of the UFO mastermind, then perhaps you can get to do a little bit of a presentation.
Yes, yeah. For those people that don't realise, yes, he was the inaugural winner of the UFO Truth Magazine Mastermind competition, which was hilarious in itself.
Yeah.
In the sense that everybody was like on a knife edge, and it went to like emergency question, and it kind of like added an extra 20-30 minutes in what should have just been like an hour. We probably went over about half an hour over from what I'd expected, but it was just a dead heat all the time. But no, it was. I tried it because I wanted to do something different, and I hadn't perhaps done as much research into it as I could have. I wasn't quite sure of the timings, but I think in the end, the audience reaction and feedback that I got, everybody loved it, and I'll be doing it again. But what we'll do next time is we'll have the proper mastermind sounds, and we learnt a little bit. Some people wanted to hear the answers. One lady said, "I want to know what the answers were." Yeah. So I'll probably read out the answers at the end. So we'll accommodate that kind of thing.
To be fair, Gary, you had some really tough questions in there, and I'll be honest, I only won it because I got the easiest question of the whole set as the final tiebreak question, I think.
Well, I again, all I'd done is that literally the day or two before, I just plucked out questions from my head, and I wrote 15 there, 15 there, 15 there, 4 different people kind of thing. And then I had some standby questions for like round 2. And then I never thought it was going to go on with emergency question, dead heat question. And it just went on and on and on. But it had all been planned, but we were a bit rushed for time. But this next time it will be built in properly and a little bit more time to it. But the audience came back and said they loved it. 1 or 2 people didn't, but the vast majority said it was great. And
in about 30 years, in about 30 years there'll be a feature film of that final tense battle between Ben Emlyn Jones and Andy Young in the first ever mastermind, UFO mastermind. It'll be a feature film, and there'll be all sorts of stars in it. Probably.
Well, the strange thing for me was I'm a real stickler for time, as you know, obviously being the host, and don't allow anything to run over. And then suddenly we've got this dead heat situation, and all my timing is going to rack and ruin through my own making. So that was a bit ironic. But no, it was good fun, and like I say, the vast majority of people really enjoyed it, so I'll do it again.
Well, I just hope if you do that David Young's there next year, because David told me I was going to win it before we went into the hall. So
oh well,
I'm not having a go unless David's there next year.
Okay, well I'm going to make a rule that you can't go back and enter it again.
Yeah, that's fair enough.
We want different people up there.
Yeah, that's good.
So that rules out Ben as well.
Oh, poor old Ben.
Oh, you could have turned it to a
He'll be
legend.
heartbroken hearing that now. He'll be heartbroken.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to actually hearing Ben speak live down at Watford, because although I've been following Ben's work for years now, and Ben was a big part of me getting to where I am, I've never actually heard him speak live, so that'll be a new experience for us.
Well, obviously we're always learning from things, and yeah, but that was actually the first time I'd seen Ben last year. So again, it was something I learned, hence why I've invited him back this time. But no, I know that since then he's done a couple of conferences where he's hosted things as well. So that's good experience for him, because he hasn't up to this point been a lecturer as such. So he, in a sense, he's finding his way. So let's see how he does, and so far so good.
Excellent. So you've got the Watford conference coming up it's May Day Saturday, isn't it?
That's right, yeah. It's the 30th of April. And before then, I've actually got a lecture on April the 13th, just a few miles away from where I live, in Shepley. And place where I did it last year as well, a local group. And then I've just come back this week from a lecture in Swansea for the Swansea UFO group, which is a new group, and I'm always keen to encourage new groups to emerge and support them. So I went down there and had a lovely time, and I'd never been to Swansea before. I've been to Cardiff before many years ago, but never Swansea. And of course it's on the Gower Peninsula, so I had a little ride round to a couple of the beaches, and it was lovely the next day. So no, it was an excellent event. Not that many people there, maybe 50, 60 people there, but they're a new group, and it was really good. And the feedback was good, and obviously got several more new subscribers to the magazine. So it's all positive stuff. And I would encourage any of the local people who are thinking of organising a group to approach me, and I will come and do them a lecture. I won't charge them a fee. As long as they cover my expenses and put me up in a hotel overnight, then that's fine. And, I think we could have a rebirth of many groups, because at one time, obviously 20 years ago, there were probably a group in most towns, but that doesn't exist now.
And do you think that's because...
A sign of...
Sorry, I was just going to say, do you think that's a sign of the times with the internet, and like you say, everybody's an armchair expert these days, aren't they?
Well, as you know, it's one of my pet hates, the armchair expert. That's nothing wrong to say that you can't troll away on the internet, but the problem is, and I said this a lot at this, that was part of the talk that I gave, is that unfortunately there are literally millions of UFO websites out there, but the majority put on information which is uncorroborated and not really sourced. And I think that's dangerous, because what it does is it breeds disinformation. So it's like a story becomes almost fact, even though it was just a story. And that's dangerous, I think, because we have enough disinformation in this subject already. We don't need more. But I don't know how you get around that. I think that's just realistically one of the downsides to the internet. There is so much choice, but it's unregulated. And the thing that gripes me is that, from my point of view, and my background as a former police officer and detective, is I can only ever look at this subject through my police evidential eyes, even though I've obviously retired. So I always try to go from an evidential point of view, to kind of like prove this subject is real and is worthy of a lot of scientific scrutiny. Unfortunately, with the rise of the internet, and in any subject, not just UFOs, people can create a website without any kind of background. They can say anything, and the story becomes so-called fact. And I think that's dangerous, because people, I have people contacting me saying, "Have you seen this story?" And it's some ludicrous story, and I just have to say, "Well, no, sorry, this is an untested source. got to err on the side of caution, things like that. So some people are very gullible because they do want to believe that UFOs are real, but they kind of like just don't have much of a filter system, and they pretty much believe what some people say. And I think that can be kind of worrying, because sometimes people contact me and they're almost paranoid and frightened because they've read something, there's going to be an invasion tomorrow kind of thing by aliens, and unfortunately it's a subject where some people I think can be psychologically affected, and they can get into a bad state if they allow things to go without being unchecked. And the problem is that a lot of these sites just regurgitate stuff with no corroboration, and I think potentially it's quite dangerous.
Yeah, and also what I see a lot, and I've heard the phrase UFO cottage industry bandied about by James Horak, who we've had on this show. I think Larry Warren and Peter Robbins have talked about it, and there are a group of people that will print anything or publish anything on the internet just so it gets some more views and more traffic to their website without any consideration for whether it's fact or not.
Well, if you think about the rise of social media, we never had a situation where whatever you did could make you kind of like an instant media personality. If you get a viral video that goes 3-4 million, suddenly you've got a real profile on Facebook and Twitter and things like that. And this is a new phenomenon, and literally anybody can put anything out there and just give me so many likes, and to try to make it go viral. And it's not about the truth; it's about trying to just make something go viral. What can we do to make it go viral? So it's a gimmick more than fact finding, and that's the downside. The internet's generally great as an information tool, but the downside is apathy. Certainly in this subject, and people they want change, but they're not prepared to do anything about it. They're supposedly interested in the subject, but they don't subscribe. You can tell them, the top researchers are writing. So if it was me, I'd think, well, that's the place to go, because the top people are writing for that magazine. But people, I guess, don't like still to pay for something that they can't hold tangibly, i.e. it's not in print. As many people will know, that when I looked to launch the magazine, I did look at the print element, but I was quoted £50,000 to £100,000. I'd have to put it against the risk of my mortgage. I was told it was a specialist publication with no guarantee of success, and you might lose your house if it fails. Well, I'm sorry, that's too big a risk. So it was for me, it was a no-brainer to go to an e-zine. Yes, it's nice to have a lovely printed magazine, of course it is, but maybe that might happen one day if there is, some rich person comes in and says, we'll back you, we'll get it turned into that. But until that happens, then it's going to be an e-zine. But personally, I think all magazines are going to struggle though, because you've seen the Independent, that's now gone in print, that's now just online. I think newspapers, national newspapers, it's only a matter of time before all of them go online. So I think the tide has turned, and with the rise of technology, tablet platforms, iPads, tablet technology, smartphone technology, people are much more happy to read off the screen. They hated it 10 years ago. Now it just turns like a book.
Yeah.
So, things are changing. It's a very fluid situation, but I think the days of print, although they're nice, are probably numbered.
Mm-hmm. Something I've noticed there's been quite a bit of furore about in the press lately, and I noticed Steve Bassett's been sending out quite a few emails about it, and that's the commitment from Hillary Clinton to disclose the truth of the UFO reality and root out all what's going on at Area 51. Do you see any real prospects of that at all, Gary?
I think at the moment she's playing a game, personally. We all know, well, those within the subject who know anything about the subject know that she was heavily involved with the Rockefeller Initiative, I think 96. That was a serious attempt to present good evidence. Now, as yet, not one of these chat show hosts has said, tell me about your links with the Rockefeller Initiative. Now, as a presidential candidate, which is what she's trying to be, if she was put to that question, she'd have to either say, well, no, I've no involvement in that, or she tells the truth. Well, if she told the truth, then it would actually outline just how heavily involved she was, and that this wasn't just a little ramshackle thing that she was going to look into if she became president, that this was actually a deep-seated passion that was part of her, you know, for many years has been with her and with Bill Clinton, you know. So as yet, not one of those chat show hosts have asked that question, which I find suspicious, because it's like, don't ask me that question, because then she has to really say that she was heavily involved. Now, think about it. If she gets the nomination, all well and good, then she can maybe say, yeah, I was heavily involved and I'm going to do this, that and the other. However, if as yet she's probably got the lead on Bernie Sanders, but it's not a done deal. So I think she's hedging her bets. So she's kind of like saying, no, I'll tell you the truth. But actually on that Kimmel show, she actually said, unless it's of national security. Well, surely all of it's going to be of national security if it's anything to it, so she won't release anything. So it's a contradiction. So she's saying, yeah, I'll look into Area 51 and I think we should tell the public the truth, unless it's a matter of national security. Well, if it is a matter of national security, she's just got a get-out clause there. She's not going to release anything. So I think she's still playing a political game. But that you'll know if say she gets the nomination, and say she goes up what looks like maybe Donald Trump, then they'll no doubt have some TV debates, as they do. And if that question doesn't come up, then there's something wrong, because I would think that Donald Trump would want that question to come up, because that's going to tie her down as to her serious involvement or not. Because if she's asked that direct question, then she has to say that she was heavily involved. She can't play it down as if it's a bit of a joke. Yeah, I'll look into UFOs. A bit like Bill Clinton done when he's been asked, oh, yeah, I asked to see the things, but I didn't see any aliens. Nobody told me about them. It's all a bit of a game. But if she's asked that direct question, she's faced with a dilemma of telling the truth and revealing all, or playing it down. If she plays it down, she plays a dangerous game, because effectively she'll be lying about her heavy involvement, and I think it will come out at some point. So for me, I'm not convinced that she's going to make this real release all the files kind of thing, because I mean you could argue that the MOD would come on and say, well, we've released all our files, we've been open and transparent, but the reality is the MOD pretty much has lied about UFOs for 60 odd years. So I wouldn't trust them as far as you could throw them.
Yeah, an interesting development last year was when John Burroughs was given his award by the Veterans Association.
Yep.
Supposedly the first man ever damaged by a UFO in the line of military duty. Has any more come out about that? Well,
here's the interesting thing. They said, well, there's two things about John Burroughs. John Burroughs was told by somebody at the MOD that they'd got another 18 files, which they'd apparently should have disclosed but hadn't.
Yeah.
And he was told that they would be released by March of this year. Well, if I'm not mistaken, we're in April. So they haven't released those 18 files, but they're probably going to come out soon. I don't think they're going to be the revelation that we all kind of hope, but they may well be interesting. And David Clark, I would say skeptical David Clark, confirmed that there's going to be nothing great in these 18 files, because he's involved in the release of them. But he didn't say when they were going to be released. So I don't think there's a smoking gun there. However, when John Burroughs got his veterans compensation, great. Really pleased for that. And I didn't want to know the amounts or anything like that. But the press release that he put out said it was kind of inferred that this was a done deal, that this was the first time an award had been linked to being exposed to a certain type of radiation, and it linked to Rendlesham Forest. That was the inference of the press release that went out by his solicitor, Francona, and I actually said to John, I says, "Is it that definitive?" And he kind of made it sound like it was. And I said, "Well, could I see a copy of the wording from the Veterans Association?" I said, "You can blank out all the figures. I'm not bothered in that at all. But I'm interested in the wording, because, as I suspected, it wouldn't be as definitive as what he obviously hoped it would be, because it hasn't changed anything, has it? Nothing's changed in the field of ufology for him getting that award. But if it was actually in black and white, and we could hold up that piece of paper and it said you were exposed to UFO, UAP radiation at Rendlesham Forest, then that would be a done deal, and we could make a big song and dance about it. But because nobody's seen that piece of paper, it's not gone anywhere.
No.
You see what I mean? It's like talking about the Holt Memorandum without actually ever having a copy of it. Until you see the document, it's the document itself, signed, 3 paragraphs, that becomes really evidential, that you could hold up in a court of law. Yeah? And that's what we need to make a bigger thing of what John got. And I've yet to see it, so I'm a little bit disappointed that document hasn't appeared. If it was, as it was said in the press release that they put out, it should have made a difference. But because it hasn't, I suspect that it wasn't quite worded as strong as what they initially thought.
Yeah, something else I noticed in reference to Rendlesham this year, there's a new, not an actual witness who was there, but there's a guy come out now who's claiming that his US security oath has expired, and that he's able to release information about all kinds of documents I've seen. The guy's not been named yet. I'm not sure if he's actually done any interviews, but have you got any thoughts on that one, Gary?
Well, unless I'm mistaken, even Nick Pope has mentioned this guy, saying that there is a guy out there.
Yeah.
Which infers that there maybe is a real person. I'm always sceptical when people say, "Oh yeah, we've got a whistleblower, but we can't name him," for obvious reasons, because it's that kind of subject. We need people to come out and say, "Yeah, I was in the Navy, my name is." That's difficult, but if we really are going to have whistleblowers, we really need the Edward Snowdens, who is Edward Snowden, to come out and say, "Yes, this is my record, and it's all provable and documented." Whenever it's an anonymous source in this subject, I don't think the press are going to take any attention to it. Yeah, there might be stories, but it won't hold any credence until we know the validation of the person saying it. Because it could be made up.
Yeah.
Who knows? Hopefully it's not. But we need some kind of verification process.
I did check back on that, see if I could find any progress on that, and I did see an article which quoted Nick Pope as saying that he'd spoken to this person several times and he had no doubt that he was who he was claiming to be because of the way that he spoke. So,
well, that's good. That's why I mentioned Nick, because I would hope that Nick's never going to get involved with somebody who's not authentic. So the fact that he said that makes you hope that this person is who he says he is and will come out. But I still think we battle against the media all the time in this subject, the mainstream media. And until we have somebody, I think, putting a name to him and saying, "I am so-and-so," I don't think it will have the same impact. That's the problem. No.
Jason, you've had a bit of experience with Nick Pope, haven't you?
Yes, I often did a lie detector test But
Or you or him?
for him.
All right, okay.
I offered to. It was when remember old Edge Media.
Yeah.
There was somebody on there who I was in contact with, and it turned out that she lived with Nick Pope. He was just putting her up, giving her a room. That's what she said. And so I said, okay, I'll tell you what. Ask him then. Say I'll pay, for him to have a lie detector test. And she said,
about what? Just lie detector about what? To ask him what?
Well, just basically about how, whether he's truthful in what he says when he's on TV and things like that. All these things, whether he's actually being truthful throughout when he's on TV.
And he obviously said no.
And yeah, well, he said, because I actually spoke to her, and she said, "Oh, you must have lots of money." And I'd actually looked into it. It was going to cost me about £600, but I was prepared to put it up at that time. Mm-hmm. And so it were a genuine offer, but it were declined.
Well, we can only speculate as to why he said no.
Of course we can. I mean, if somebody offered me if someone said to me, take a lie detector test, I'd tell them to piss off and all. I don't read anything into it at all. It's just one of me sort of like a story I can tell. I offered Nick Pope a lie detector test and he turned it down. That's all it is.
It's a nice anecdote. It's a nice anecdote. Yeah.
Yeah, that's all. I don't infer anything from it. I'm sure.
My anecdote might be slightly different. With Nick, I've obviously met Nick many times, had lunch with him and whatever, but we actually met up without any pre-planning. I went over to do some filming for a Close Encounters documentary series, and what they do is it's a Canadian company, and basically all the researchers who were telling their various bits of cases were flown into one place, one studio, as it were, to tell their bits segments. And so they, over a course of a week, they bring in lots of researchers, and they flew us to Toronto, which is where it was all being filmed. And at the time I was there was AJ Javad, Nick, and Gilbert Bodas, the veteran French researcher, and we ended up going out for a meal. And without going into too much detail, one of the things that came out is Nick said that obviously he's living in America now, but he said that because he's in America, people carry guns, and he said he got a gun, and that kind of made us all laugh a bit, because it's the idea of Nick Pope wielding a gun is kind of a comical. It kind of throws up a Mr. Bean in my mind, without being rude. It just they don't seem to go together. So we all had a laugh about it over lunch, and I hope Nick doesn't mind me saying that, but it raised a bit of a laugh.
Nick Pope, we're a shooter. Well, good to be didn't come after me with it.
But it's a good anecdote, though, isn't it? I mean, it just conjures up so many images.
It does rather, doesn't it? It's sort of like there's definitely a slapstick comedy in there, isn't there, with this Englishman.
We're just there shaking our heads thinking, oh, Nick.
I'm just thinking Tino's going to be...
Out of his holster and it falls to the floor because he's that heavy, he can't lift it.
I'm just thinking Tino's going to be all over this, isn't he?
Yeah, actually, I shouldn't have said that, should I? Because Tino will be now etching his face onto another poster, and it'll be him doing the Clint Eastwood impression in Good, Bad and the Ugly.
Yeah.
Kind of thing.
Oh, yeah.
But there you go.
Oh, we've got a question for you in the chat room, Gary. Carrots is asking, has Gary heard about a finding by NASA/CIA or some alphabet gang that disclosure would trigger mass suicide, estimated at over 2 billion?
No, I now think it's absolutely rubbish.
Mm.
How can anybody calculate so many people? I think there is only about 7 billion people on the Earth.
Yeah.
That's about 20-30%. So that's a mass extinction, basically. I don't think revealing that ET exists is going to trigger anything like that. There may well be some suicides, but then you can probably say that about any other subject. People are going to be traumatized.
For me,
I think we live in an age now where I think people can handle the truth.
Yeah, sorry talking over you there, Gary. For me, it was revealed in October 1983 because front page of the News of the World, UFO lands in Suffolk, and that's official. And I thought, I read that. I thought, well, it's all over. We'll all know about it tomorrow.
Powerful forces don't want that to happen.
No. But, yeah, going back to Age of Ard, I mean, I'd heard of the Virginia incident, but when I heard him speak on it at Holmfirth, it was quite mind-blowing, the detail that he went into there.
Oh, absolutely, and that was only a snapshot of the case. You know, it really is one of the top cases in the world, and there's no two ways about it. Several creatures, at least two, were recovered alive, certainly initially alive, and you know, I think it's a very strong case. And as ever, within a few hours of this creature's been recovered, you know, the military start turning the heat up and start denying that they were involved. You know, but the fact is, we know for a fact that the doctor who treated one of the soldiers who recovered one of the creatures, who handled the creature, died of strange kind of like radiation poisoning a few weeks later, and the doctor was gone on record. So, I mean, how often do you get a case where there is a proven fatality involving with a so-called extraterrestrial creature? So, I mean, the fact that there's a lot of people gone on the record, it's an outstanding case. It's like, again, very few people outside of really strong enthusiasts of the subject will know much about what happened in the Amazon in the 70s. The Operation Prato, Operation Sorcerer as it's called, Operation Prato in Portuguese. But basically, that's an amazing story. You know, it'll make a great film, a real film, as well as, you know, people could see the science, you know, fictional story. But the real story is that in part of the Amazon, local third world kind of like tribes people were being hit by beams from the sky, often inside their homes, which were like shacks kind of thing, and beams would come through the roof kind of thing and make these cooler-shaped burns into the shoulder. I think at least one person had died before the military got involved, but literally an area in the Calaris region, basically the native people were being attacked. And when that got back to the local authorities, they eventually called in the military, and the military ended up going in for 4 months to do a study. And over that 4 months, they had many, many sightings, close proximity sightings. There were hours of cine footage taken, or I think over 400 UFO photographs taken. Incredible encounters, all with the military. And we know about this only because Captain Hollander, Colonel Hollander, I think it was, he disclosed this to AJ and another researcher called Marco Petit on video. And the strange thing is, 2 days later, Hollander is dead. So-called suicide by his own hand 2 days later, which is a bit odd to say the least. But, you know, he went on the record, and we have since, or AJ has since been able to obtain many of the photographs, many of the military reports. But what he's never been able to get is all of the reports, and he has never seen any sign of the cine footage that was taken. I think there was supposedly something like 16 hours of cine footage taken by the military of UFOs. Well, can you imagine if that was disclosed, it was still in somebody's possession and it was released? That would be a game changer if it showed UFOs in close proximity to military people. It would probably be a game changer, but I think AJ has given up on ever seeing that cine footage for obvious reasons. It's either been destroyed, confiscated, probably by the Americans, who we do know now turned up after the 4-month operation was suddenly terminated, the one that Hollander ran. He was suddenly told to pull the plug. He's not happy, but he's following orders, pulls the plug. But we then have found out that the Americans went in afterwards. And of course, I believe the Americans are the most secretive government in the world on UFOs. They own this subject worldwide. They turn up at all the best cases, and I think they've gone in there and done whatever they do, retrieval teams or whatever. But yeah, it's a great case, and yet few people, certainly in the mainstream, have any idea about these kind of evidential cases that have got lots of documentation to prove that it all happened. And it's frustrating, and that's what we battle with all the time.
That one in the Amazon, wasn't it centred on a place called Colares?
Yes, Colares. The Colares area.
Yeah.
And many people of the natives had received these burns, and I think one person had died. And at first, kind of people just thought there were people being crazy, making up stories. But eventually, I think one of the nurses who went on to, and has took part in a Brazilian documentary on the case, she went public and said, actually, I was treating somebody when she saw the beams coming down herself. So she became a witness herself and realised just how real it was. And that went back to the nearest town mayor. And the mayor put pressure on the Brazilian military to get involved, and that's how they got involved. But a fantastic case, and those kind of cases really should be on the 6 o'clock news, and that's what you find frustrating with this subject, that you have these great cases that nobody hears about, and that's the frustration. With the mainstream, they're not interested. As I said at Southend the other day, I said, you would think an investigative journalist, if they were tasked with researching UFOs, they would start at the best evidence, the top 3% of cases, the cases that defy explanation after investigation. But unfortunately they don't. They always start at the 100%. Well, we know that 97% are just misidentification, genuine mistakes, atmospherics or whatever. But why would you start at 100% when you can go straight to your hardcore best cases? That's what they do over any other subject, but not when it comes to UFOs. And that tells me that they don't want to tell the truth about the best cases.
No.
What the mainstream media seem to do with the UFO subject is it's either ridiculed, or it's you're sort of given. Like you said, these UFO shows that are on Discovery and things like that, that really are just aimed to try to debunk what people have seen or what people have experienced, and it's almost as if they're sort of giving people that are interested in the subject a little bit of carrot, and then beating them with a stick afterwards with all the ridicule that goes on.
No, I agree. They've always played hot and cold with it, but that's done deliberately. That's part of the keeping the status quo. They want to entertain. They don't necessarily want to tell the truth, but they want to entertain. That's their business, to entertain. So they don't mind the fact that it's not all about telling the truth per se. They just want to entertain. So they'll tell some of the truth. A typical documentary format will be in the first 20 minutes, they'll have a pilot talking about his case. So the audience thinking, wow, this is a really good, credible case. And then they'll start talking about the history of UFOs and the iconography of it, the communion head, the alien grey head now, X-Files, that kind of imagery. And then they'll finish off. So that then puts them on a plateau. So they've been on a high, on an upward curve, listening to the pilot, this is credible. Then they get a bit of the history, bit of iconography, the history of the subject, and then they start to peak off to go to a plateau. And then, of course, what they then do is they have the people on the top of the hill in the last section going, mommy on me, dressed in the gowns. And so the audience participation drops off thinking, these are all nutters. And then you're back with that straightforward line that you started with.
Yeah.
And that's the general premise, is that it's entertainment. It's not necessarily about the truth. And we don't want to tell you the best evidence because there's a higher agenda. I don't believe that the majority of people who make documentaries are hiding things, but what you've got to realise is that with TV is that when you get a series, you have to put a pitch. And the bottom line of your pitch to get the finance for the series is, what's your bottom line? Well, they have to disclose what the bottom line is before the series is made to get the money. So they're basically going to say, well, we're going to do this, that, and the other, but we're basically going to keep it at the status quo. Okay, you get your money, make your series. So it's a done deal before we even start.
Oh, yeah, and they quite often round them out with some redneck who's got more teeth than brain cells, don't they? And he ain't got many teeth.
Absolutely. I mean, unfortunately, we are a bit of an easy target. For example, when we look at the abduction side, which is very real, and the vast majority of people who claim to be abductees are abductees. But there are some strange individuals out there, and of the documentaries that have been made, certainly in recent years, they have just targeted the people who look a bit absurd, regardless of whether they're genuine or not. But they've picked on people who are easy targets, rightly or wrongly, just to make us look stupid. And unfortunately, what I would say there is some people in the UFO community have allowed themselves to become a part of that process, because they've put these people forward without ever thinking, God, this might not look good on TV. It might not just look right. And I think that should be guarded against, because you should look at the bigger picture of how it will look on national TV. And I think there's never been a decent documentary made by any terrestrial British company yet, and they always go to the extremes. So if you give someone who looks maybe a little bit odd, the media are just going to milk it and present those people as kooks, regardless of how good or how genuine their story is. And that's what they want to do. They just want to make us look like fools. Mm-hmm. They won't want to tell the best cases. It's all about entertainment from their point of view, and living to the status quo that they agreed in the original pitch.
So, do you think that's perhaps why there's never been a feature film made about Rendlesham, even though there's quite a few people, I believe, have written scripts, including yourself?
I don't think anybody's written a script apart from me, to be honest. I think it's been put out. I think a few people have been supposedly tended to do it, but I don't think I've ever seen anybody do a script other than mine. Mine was written in collaboration with Colonel Holt, who I've now broken away from because of his, I think, ludicrous comments about Larry Warren, mm-hmm. Which I disagreed with. Therefore, I ended my association because I thought that was wrong, because he kept claiming that Larry was this, that, and the other, and produced no evidence. And I said, look, if you've got the evidence, then produce it. But if not, shut up, because you're just slandering somebody. And I didn't think it was right. He made 2 sustained attacks on Larry, who I consider a friend, and I don't consider him a liar. I consider him a very real victim of this, perhaps more of a victim than anybody. Psychologically, has been a very young man when he got caught up involved in these very serious events. And it is, no doubt, messed with his life. But I don't think he's a liar, and I thought Holt was wrong, and I told him that, and I said, I'm sorry, I can't work with you anymore. So basically that's what that was. But the script that we had and was on the cards has been to many, many people. But I say many, it's probably been looked at by several production companies, genuine film, including one very big one. And I had a meeting with a very large British firm, very well-known British firm, probably about 2 years ago. And they basically said, yeah, it's a great story, but they wanted it to be written in a different way. And I think they really wanted it to be written with more fiction to make it cinematic. And I said, no, I can only write it as the truth. And it was done like on a chronological timeline, but with some artistic merit. But perhaps 80% of it was absolutely spot on for the narrative, and I think it's an incredible story. I was told that a lot of people, including a lot of famous people, supposedly George Lucas, supposedly Steven Spielberg, have looked at the Rendlesham case, but they haven't been able to come up with a viable concept in how to put it over because it's an ensemble cast. It opens over several nights. There isn't a main Harrison Ford kind of hero that links through all the 3 nights. It's an ensemble piece, and they probably don't like that. I was told, you can do this, you can go away and do it in a slightly different perspective, but for whatever reason, I disagreed with that. And there is another. At some point, I am going to write another screenplay about Rendlesham, and it will be on an entirely different perspective, and it will be told from somebody else's perspective, who I won't mention at this moment in time. But it will be one of the witnesses, and I think that will make for a better, more rounded piece. But it should be made into a film, whether I'm involved or not, because the story is so good. And even if you take away all of the, many differences between what the witnesses have said, and just look at the evidence, especially with the people that have come forward, like the 2 witnesses from the air traffic control tower that Robert Hastings got to go public in his book UFOs and Nukes. Nobody ever covers those in the documentaries, and yet that was a vital breakthrough. Over the Christmas period, they came forward, 2 people named in his book, who said, yeah, we were in the air traffic control tower, and we confirmed that we saw a visual UFO of the airfield, and 2, it was on our ATC radar. Now that's brilliant, because up until that point, there were only a couple of brief mentions, a couple of blips here and there of the event, but this was different. People were saying they saw a UFO over the bay, and they were in a different section. They weren't military police, they were in air traffic controllers, so that's a completely different section. So that's great corroboration that the UFOs were involved over Rendlesham, and it costly destroys the lighthouse theory once and for all, as But the skeptics want to have something to hold on to, and they're allowed to hold on to it because of the media allow them to keep putting these ridiculous stories forward. I mean, when I did the This Morning program with Chris French, what people don't see is on live TV with this subject, you are almost coaxed into saying what you're going to say. It's all worked out beforehand. Right, you're going to say that, Chris is going to say that, and it's like a script worked out. Now, there's one thing having a basic format, but basically you were told what you were going to say, what bit was he was going to say this, you were going to say that. And of course, I'm on live TV, I'm thinking, no, I've got to try to tell the truth. So, like, I went on there armed with a couple of little surprises, like the coins in my pocket to make the triangle, to make the point of where the background radiation peaked in each of the indentations only. And I had the photograph in the recreation photograph in my back pocket where I'd stood at the side of the farmer's field with Holt, where he said, no, the red object was seen clearly for the first time out of the forest, and it was to the left of the farmhouse, whereas the Orford lighthouse was way off in the distance to the right of the farmhouse, so it's not the lighthouse. All those kind of things. And Chris French and the TV people were panicking because I'm doing something off script. They were panicking. But that's, what people don't understand is that with this subject, you have one arm tied behind your back, especially in a live audience. And interestingly, I've never been invited back onto live TV since, for that obvious reason.
Wasn't it Philip Schofield said on that interview that he'd be interested in having you back on to present more evidence?
Yeah, what happened was, what you don't realise is that when I got asked to go on, I appeared in the February with 2 other people, Chris French and Bridget Barclay.
Mm-hmm.
And basically, we went on there, and I went on there to be deliberately provocative, i.e. a bit arsey, which is not me at all. But because this was national live TV, I deliberately had practiced being stroppy and wanted to, I know that you're only going to give it a few seconds, little sound bites. So my aim was to be a bit grouchy, to be a bit angry and say, look, let me challenge you to show you the evidence. Well, if you actually watch that first interview in February 2012, I was surly. Got into a bit of a confrontation with Chris French, done deliberately to try to provoke a response, a challenge. Let me show you the best evidence. And of course, Philip Schofield's going, yeah, this is great, we'll have you back. And the idea was, after the end of that program was, we'll have you come back, we'll go through 5 cases. By the time 2 months later that I was called back, just with Chris French this time, they'd reduced it from 5 cases to 3 cases. And by the day of the TV appearance, it was then down to 1 case, Rendlesham Forest, where they got it all worked out nicely, neatly. Well, who's going to say this? Who's going to say that? Hence why I brought a few surprises, because they weren't really interested in telling the truth. But Philip Schofield said we should have you on here every week talking about UFOs. Never been on since. Somebody does not want the best evidence to be shown and debated properly. I kind of get, it's a bit strange, really. I can only associate UFOs with having an anti-UFO person there. If you're a I don't know, let's say a cookery expert, do you have a non-cookery expert with you? No. If you're an architect, do you have a non-architect with you? Do you have, if you sell houses as an estate agent, do you have a non-estate agent with you? No, you don't. You just accepted and you talk about your job, but not when it comes to UFOs. And they always say, in the balance, we have to have a balance with UFOs. Well, when you talk about ghosts, do they have an anti-ghost person there? No, they don't. When they talk about paranormal shows, do they have an anti-paranormal person guest when they're interviewed? No, they don't. But UFOs, because we know that there's a lot to this subject, we've got to have a skeptic on there. We can't allow on mainstream TV an expert to give his opinion without being challenged. Mm-hmm. And that's the problem. It's ridiculous. Because the real thing is, when I'm putting out something on there, I'm not lying about it. When the skeptic goes on there, all they are there is to throw a spanner in the works and come out with a generalization. But the point is, the media, the national media, allow these people airtime. They don't. The skeptical arguments do not stand up to scrutiny. But nobody's bothered about that. They're allowed to keep saying it's a lighthouse. In fact, a classic example of how you could manipulate media happened during the last 2 documentaries I've made for terrestrial TV, which is a Channel 4 and a Channel 5 about Rendlesham Forest. And these were like a couple of years ago, and they approached me, and I said, yeah, okay. I said, but you generally have got a terrible record of dealing with this subject fairly. Oh, we are going to do it this time. It's going to be brilliant. We're really excited to have you on board, and we want to tell the truth about Rendlesham. I said, okay. I said, well, okay, I'm going to make you a challenge. Do you want a world exclusive about Rendlesham? Oh, yes, please. Yes, please. And I said, well, I'm going to make you a challenge that I'm going to give you this world exclusive, and you're not going to use it in your final edit. Oh, no, we'll use it. Use it. Okay, here's the world exclusive. It's odd in itself, but during my time when I was collaborating with Colonel Holt, I, on one occasion, got him to retrace the steps of his night out and his 4.5 hours in the woods, as best you could, all those years later. And I actually wanted to identify where the second farmer's field was that he talks about on his audio tape. This is the second farmer's field where the UFO stops above his head and shines the laser beam down at his feet with the other 4 people around him. That's a pivotal moment. Yeah. And I went with him and identified where that field was. Well, I've watched loads of documentaries. It's never been aired. Okay? So I said, look, that's the challenge. I will show you where that incident, and it's pivotal to the genuineness of this case. Mm-hmm. And they said, oh, yeah, this is great. Yeah, we'll do that. We'll do that. So took them to the field, did the filming. That's the field. And they got me to stand in certain positions and film, but not particularly near the field, or not with the field in the background, or just slightly away from the field. So and I said, well, you won't use it in the final edit. We will. When the programme aired, do various interviews and whatever, talk about Rendlesham. No mention of this field. And do you know why? Because at the end, they said, more or less, sum it up. So, Rendlesham Forest, it's such a famous case. Was it aliens? Or was it perhaps the lighthouse, as some people suggest? Now, they had to be able to mention the lighthouse. Now, if that had included the field where the beam came down, it obviously couldn't have been a lighthouse, could it?
No.
It couldn't be a flying lighthouse that stops above your head. So that would have totally ruled out the lighthouse theory once and for all. So that's why they couldn't use it in the final edit. And 2 documentaries, Channel 4, Channel 5, did exactly the same. Same challenge, and it wasn't in. So that tells me that they were just going to a script that left it status quo. They didn't want to tell the truth. Who would turn down a world exclusive that's never been filmed before? Ridiculous. But they did. All because at the end, they wanted to put it out the tantalizing thing. So was it aliens? Or was it just the beam of a lighthouse? If they'd have included that segment in the field, they couldn't have used that line at the end about the lighthouse. One would have cancelled out the other. So they don't want to show you that. They don't want to tell the public that it's ludicrous, the lighthouse. It shouldn't even appear in any of the documentaries because it was ludicrous to begin with, because Colonel Holt used to take visitors to the lighthouse, showing them around. Oh, this is Orford Ness Lighthouse. So he knew where it was. And I can guarantee you that the guy in the tower, in the weapons storage area, because I worked in those things, in those nuclear bases for 3 of my 6 years in the Royal Air Force Police, at RAF Larbrook in what was then West Germany, and RAF Honington in Suffolk, same county as the event at Bentwaters Woodbridge. I worked in the same sites, so I know exactly the layout. One of them is at the Bentwater site is identical to the layout, physical layout of the site at RAF Larbrook that I worked on. It's exactly the same, and I've got a photograph proving that. But the point is, the guy in the high tower has a 360 above the forest that's around it. The trees at that point, when the base was open, were only allowed to reach like 40 feet, whereas the tower was 80 feet. So it had a full 360. So the guy in the tower knew exactly where all the landmarks were, the beam of the lighthouse in the distance. He'd see it every minute, every few seconds, every 5 seconds he'd see that beam. So how ludicrous it is for the media to say that these airmen went outside with their guns and they got really scared because it was dark and they're traipsing around in the woods for 4.5 hours and they got confused by a lighthouse.
Yeah.
I've got a question for you. Has anybody tried to go and recreate because I'm assuming the lighthouse is still on, or it was, it has been for a number of years. Has anybody been out and tried to recreate what could have happened and what could have?
I put it this way: I went on a secret visit with my then fiancée. We're now married, second marriage, but we went out there unbeknown to anybody before all these new fences were up and things like that, and we filmed the lighthouse with night vision at around midnight, at roughly the same kind of time of the year. And what's clear, if you remember, the farmhouse in the central field, you basically, after it being followed through the woods, it then is seen in the open air for the first time in a farmer's field. Across the other side of the farmer's field, there is a farmhouse, in a sense, in the middle of your frame of reference. The UFO was seen by Holt and his team low down to the ground to the left of the farmhouse. They described it from the other side of the field as being the size of a car, red, glowing, and dropping what appeared to be molten metal onto the ground. It was hovering about 10, 15 feet off the ground. It was so bright that it was casting a glow into the farmhouse windows, making it almost look like the farmhouse was on fire. Now, the actual Orford Ness lighthouse is way off in the distance on the horizon to the right of the farmhouse. So it's unequivocal. So I went back there with night vision equipment, and I've got that clip. It's actually, I'm sure it's on the magazine Facebook page that's on there, a YouTube page. for you to look at. And it basically quite clearly shows that every 5 seconds you'll get the beam, but it's clearly to the right of the farmhouse. And we did it from the perspective of where Holt said he was when he emerged from the forest with his team of men. So it's ridiculous that the lighthouse theory is used. It always has been. If it had been a proper police investigation, yes, people would suggest early on in the first few hours of an investigation, if it had been treated like a proper police investigation, somebody would have thrown this as a suggestion, and you would have gone, yeah, let's look at it. No, doesn't add up. And that theory that was put forward would get put in a basket that's basically dead in the water. And it would have been dead in the water within an hour.
Perhaps they'd say that the light from the lighthouse reflected off a UFO. So they said technically we were right.
Yeah, but it's like you've got quite a prominent skeptic astronomer who's got his own website. I'm sure you know what I mean. Mm-hmm. And he comes on and says historically, I've synced it to the audio from Holt's tape, and there, can you hear it? They're talking about there's a beacon. Look, and there it goes again. But the reality is, it's every 5 seconds. Well, you could be not the brightest tool in the box. Go to the edge of the field in the dark and see a light, and for the first minute maximum, you go, what's that light? What's that? And then you just start counting. It goes off, it comes on. It's back again. Then you're going to go 1, 2, 3. There it's again. 1. It's there again every 5 seconds. So you're good at within a minute. I defy anybody not to see a beacon from a long time, from far off, and that goes off every 5 seconds, and not conclude within a minute that it's a lighthouse beacon of some kind. Yet the media would still put forward this ridiculous assertion that men who are trained to guard nuclear weapons, who have been working all the hours under the sun, who were used to going off base, not necessarily with their weapons, but used to going off base at night, that they would be so confused and frightened, and that they would not be able to work out that every 5 seconds that's likely to be a lighthouse. It's ridiculous. It would have been kicked out in the first few minutes. But the guy in the tower, there's a lot more. There are more witnesses to come out that have never come forward. And the principal ones are the people in the weapons storage area. When you're working those nuclear storage areas, there are always people up in the tower, people in the control rooms, which in this case at Bentwatch was actually off just outside, but inside, within the perimeter, there would have been several roving patrols, at least 1 2-man teams, possibly 2 2-man teams, roving around the site, because that's what you do. You have what's called a SAT and a BAF. Their reaction, if anything happens there, they can run to wherever on the site. And in certain alarm situations, the BAF come out and back up the SAT. BAF and SAT, that's what it's called. Right? The SAT are operating and walking around, usually at least 2 with machine guns live armed, just roaming around. And so when Holt confirms on the video again, which is on my the magazine YouTube channel, which is where I went to the top of the weapons storage area for where the lighthouse was, and he goes, it's over there, points to it, and then he basically said it wasn't the lighthouse, blah, blah, blah. But basically he said that he changed radio frequency to the tower when he was out in the woods and he'd seen his UFO that shone the beam down, after he sees a UFO putting a beam down towards the ground. However, from their terrain point of view, they couldn't be sure where that beam was coming down to geographically. So what he did was he tuned his radio channel. He had 3 frequencies, and he tuned it into the tower, the weapons storage area tower, and he heard the guy in the tower saying that there are beams being shone down into the nuclear storage bunkers. Well, can you imagine if you're walking around with your machine gun when you see a UFO shining a beam down into the nuclear bunkers? What the hell are you going to do? And he confirms that there were witnesses walking around. He actually says that on the video he made for me. Now, those people have never come forward, never ever been identified, but they are there and they are out there. And if indeed a UFO was shining down into the bunkers, what a story that would be if one of them was to come forward. Mm-hmm. That would certainly have the people in the mainstream panicking a bit. Not bear in mind this as well. I was told, I'll let you work this out between the lines, I was told by a senior military American official that there were more nuclear weapons in that base at Bentwaters, in the weapon storage area, than anywhere else in Europe. And all the people who were camped outside Greenham Common, he was laughing at them because their nukes were in the wrong place and nobody had a clue. Bear in mind that in December 1980, what was happening in the world? People say, why UFOs, why little old Suffolk? It's dead easy. At a time of world crisis, what world crisis? Two things were happening. One, the rise of the Polish shipyard workers under Lech Wałęsa, the Solidarność movement. The people were becoming revolutionary and threatening to break away from the Soviet state. Don't forget, in 1980, Poland was still a Soviet satellite country under the Soviet Union. And don't forget that in Hungary in 1968, when they had threatened to rebel, they sent tanks in and quelled that rebellion. Killed a lot of people. Well, at the time of December 1980, hundreds of thousands of Soviet troops were massing on the borders of Poland. Mm-hmm. And it looked like, for a time, that they were going to go in and quell the Polish shipyard workers under Lech Wałęsa. So there's that happening. And you've also then got the American-Iranian hostage crisis. Do you remember when they took about 50-odd hostages and they held them up in front of the cameras and they had them for weeks, and there were big demonstrations in America. So there was that going on as well. So tensions were heightened. So now I think that was Libya.
That was Libya. I know there was the Iranian.
No, it was Iranian.
Was it?
I'm sure it was the Iranian hostages. It's not Libya, but basically, so there were two major events going on. Increasing the tensions worldwide. But the thing as well is, if there were more nuclear weapons in the Bentwaters weapon storage area than anywhere else in Europe, it broke all the armament agreements. Mm-hmm. This is why certain American officials, senior military officers will never go public, and they will always say we can neither confirm or deny that there were nuclear weapons at Bentwaters. Yeah? Because if they did admit to it, that there were nuclear weapons there, it would break all the armament agreements. Well, think about this. If indeed there were all these nuclear weapons there, more than anywhere else in Europe, and they were all in breach of the armament agreements, then do you not think that at a time of world crisis, UFOs who maybe like our planet think, whoa, what are they doing there? Ooh, they shouldn't be there. And that might be a destabilization point. So for me, there's genuine reasons, I think, to think why UFOs turn up there and put beams down into that storage, because I think it was a nuclear weapons inspection by a UFO. That's what I think it was, because they knew that at a time of crisis that they shouldn't be there. Now, the obvious question is, well, why should they be bothered if indeed that was the case? But let me put this to you. My assertion on that is that UFOs are seen in and out, going in and out of large bodies of water worldwide. USOs seen underwater, coming out, going up in the air, and also going into the water. We only know 1% of the ocean. We know more about the surface of the moon and Mars than we do about the depths of the ocean. For all our, what we think is clever technology, we only know 1% of the oceans. So that means 99% is unknown, which means that quite conceivably like in the film The Abyss, similar scenario, there may well be underwater bases in the deepest trenches that have been there perhaps for thousands of years by ET. They're still down there. It's quite conceivable to me that in that 99% unknown, that they may be down there, and that's why they're seen in and out of water. Now, if that was the case, then is the Earth not their planet as well, not their habitat as well? So if at a time of world crisis, would they want us to go to nuclear Armageddon? And that's why I think they're interested, because they have their own assets here in bases under the sea, and so this is their world as well as ours. And so therefore they don't want to see mankind set forward a destruction, Armageddon, and blow the kingdom to come and blow up their environment as well. That's my take on it.
Thanks for that, Gary. Oh, I've just noticed. Normally, after the first hour, we play a little tune to give us all a break, but we're 20 minutes into the second hour. Do you want a little break, Gary, or do you want to keep going?
No, I'll have a little break if that's what you want to do.
Okay.
I'll go for a wee.
Okay, we'll be back in about 4 minutes then, folks. And welcome back to Raconteurs News, bringing you untwisted, unsweet news every Tuesday and Friday on raconteursnews.com with myself, Andy Young, and also Jason Holmes. And before we go any further, I'd just like to say, if you like what we're doing and you'd like to support us, we have got a donate button on the website. So if you could spare £1, a couple of pounds, a £5, a tenner a month, that would be really great and help us to expand and move forward. We've got other hosts looking to come on board with us, and we're hoping we'll be able to give them a home. Now, also, we've got T-shirts on the site in the shop, and fine T-shirts they are, and we can post one of those out to you if you want one. And everything supports the work that we're doing here. But anyway, that's got the rent paid. Back to the show. Gary, have you finished your curry, mate?
Yeah, just finished off nicely. Thank you very much.
Oh, nice one, yeah. We did have a question before the break, actually, but I didn't get a chance to squeeze it in. And Carrots was asking, what is Gary's opinion of Tim Good's book? He says he's got a copy of his 1990 UFO report. I actually got, what was it, Earth and Alien Enterprise, his new book. I got that for Christmas, but I still haven't got round to reading it yet. I keep getting books thrown at me. Read this, read this. But
yeah,
I will.
I'm the same. Tim Good, I would have to say, is a legend.
Yeah.
In the sense of that he's, I think, had 12 or 13 books. I think it's 12 books published over his period of research. And in many ways, I'd kind of regard him as the most famous British ufologist, because his track record is tremendous. And what I would say is that two books in particular, Above Top Secret and Beyond Top Secret, I think are akin to being the British Bibles of British ufology. They were tremendous breakthrough books. Very evidential, a lot of military records, pilots, a lot of military cases. So for me, I've always loved those kind of evidential cases. So for me, they are absolutely classic UFO books. And, I'd still say that the best history book I've ever read in layman's language is still Richard Dolan's first volume of UFOs in the National Security State, because that combines political shenanigans and how it all developed, and that's because Richard was firstly an historian, and then he was also a political historian. So when he came to get involved with UFOs, he had those skills on how to present it in layman's language. And the early period of UFOs, from Foo Fighters onwards through to, I think it's 1971, 73, is the first volume. And I think it sets out in layman's language the history very well. So I would always recommend that. But certainly my favourite British books are Above Top Secret, Beyond Top Secret, and the Covert Agenda by Nick Redfern, which is one of his early books, but a fantastic British book of reference work. And of course, I'm pleased to have Nick coming over for the main conference in September. And I only recently, I'd been on a radio show with him a while ago, but I'd never actually met Nick. But in December, I went to Brazil for one of AJ's conferences, and sure enough, I ended up sharing a room, not in the biblical way with Nick, I might add, but yeah, we shared a room and we got on like house on fire. And on the strength of that, I invited him to the conference. I mean, believe it or not, I was amazed to find out that he'd actually written 33 books.
Whoa!
You know, so he's actually churns 2 books out a year, which is pretty amazing. But he's very dedicated. Obviously, I think living in Phoenix, and he basically does it like a 9-to-5 job. Everybody, all writers, I think, are different, got different ways of approaching writing, but he's very strict. He basically works Monday to Friday from 9 to 5 at his typewriter kind of thing, and not many people actually do that. Oh, I'm going to let my dog out now. Who's just come in.
Yeah, no worries, mate.
She's out. She's gone.
Okay.
You should have gone now. Break.
Well, yeah, but unfortunately, she doesn't understand radio shows that well. But no, she's there. And I've got my big German Shepherd now thinking, why have you let her out and not me?
Oh,
well, all right.
You were talking about a euphemism when you said you were going to have to let your dog out.
Oh, no. I've got 2 dogs. And Daisy's gone out, but she'll have to come in through the other door. I'm speaking to my daughter, cross purposes, during a live radio show.
Oh, no worries. I'm sure you cope with it. Something, yeah, a comment Richard Dolan came out with, and I think it was at Rendlesham when he was there, was that back end of 2014, when John and Larry were there and Richard Dolan. Yeah. And it was very kind of illustrative of how fascinating this subject is and how it draws you in, when he said that he took an interest in this subject and he thought, right, I'm going to take 3 months out and I'll sort this out. I'll find out what it's all about. And 20-odd years later, he's written, I don't know how many books, he's touring the world, doing radio shows, and it's taken over his life.
Oh, absolutely. And that's I've spoken to Richard several times about this and how he got involved. And, you know, he really was just an historian. And then he kind of thought, like, I will just have a short dabble at the UFO aspect. But the more he looked at the evidence, the more he quickly became convinced as to ET reality in a small proportion of cases. I mean, we're talking just about that 3%, but that 3% that we talk about is 3% of millions of cases worldwide, historically. So we're talking many, many thousands of sightings that are quality. And if we were ever, in a sense, able to put our best evidence together and show them, we'd have this great body of evidence. The downside is that, unfortunately, historically, and it's still true, UFO groups and countries are not very good at working together consistently to produce the best evidence. You know, unfortunately, ufology should have, when you think that, you know, the interest in the 50s in particular, massive groups where they had thousands of people, NICAP, you know, Flying Saucer Review, Bufora, had lots of people, members. But we were never, ever able to successfully get a worldwide UFO NATO kind of organization. Why can't we have 2 respected representatives from each country in the world who are experts and recognized as experts in their field from each country in a big coordinated political kind of panel group akin to NATO or the UN? We should have been able to do that to organise ourselves. Had we have been able to do that without squabbling and fighting, I think we'd have been able to exert more pressure on governments. But unfortunately, the history of ufology is littered with infighting, and my group's better than your group, and I'm not working with him, and therefore we don't present our best evidence.
No, I mean, that's something we're up against in whatever field of, well, I suppose the word that comes to mind is truth that you're talking about. There, obviously, groups are going to get infiltrated because the powers that be don't want these truths come out. But I've seen so much this week particularly of people name-calling and you're a shill, and it really beggars belief, because they don't need government infiltrators when they've got these people doing the job for them, do they?
Oh, absolutely, and that's what I'm saying. There's one thing having a difference of opinion. That's normal.
Yeah.
But you should be able to work with each other on a professional basis for a common aim, and unfortunately, we don't seem to be able to do that.
No, well, it's not like every guest that we have on here, we believe every single bit of what they say. We give them a platform to speak, and we might question them on one or two things. We're not about ripping people to pieces when they come on and talk to us, and we give them a chance to speak. By and large, we don't book people who we think are bonkers, because what would be the point?
What would be the point?
Yeah.
Who would want to listen to somebody just getting castigated or just being challenged all the time? Mm-hmm. It's not the third degree. In a sense, you want to promote the subject but make it entertaining, and you hopefully invite people on who you think are going to do that. What would be the point in just antagonising your guest, who after all is your guest?
Absolutely.
Not a prisoner.
Absolutely.
Yeah, we're not interested in what you've got to say, then we're not going to invite you on, are we? I mean, we've had some great guests.
Right.
Great guests on, and there's not really much point. And we've seen this week, I just want to sort of like back up what Andy said, particularly this week, it seems that we've got to another level of nastiness, and it seems to be taking on some sort of bullying form as well, which I don't like. But we prefer to stay out of anybody's got a grievance. We don't want to. We don't want to know.
Well, the thing is, yeah, I can have a grievance with person A, person B, but I don't have to make it public and wash my linen in public. Yeah. And unfortunately, this is what happens all too often. I mean, you could say then that I've had a go at Colonel Holt, but it was such a big thing over the Larry Warren thing that I just, on a point of principle, says I can't work with you. But I'm being upfront about it. I'm not name calling him. I'm just saying that if you had the evidence that you claimed you had, you put it out there. So that's, I think, evidential. And if not, which he hasn't ever produced any evidence, then you shouldn't be saying it. Because I wouldn't like somebody calling me without producing any kind of evidence. It would seem very unfair. And so that's why I did what I did. But some people might say that's washing your linen in public. But I think because so many people knew that I had that collaboration, I think it's incumbent of me to actually give an explanation as to why I've not got that collaboration with him anymore. It's an obvious question. Why are you not working alongside him now to get Rendlesham out there? Well, I'll do my own Rendlesham thing, but I can't work with a guy who's going to make unsubstantiated claims. And I think that's a reasonable viewpoint.
I think that's absolutely reasonable. And to be honest, I back you 100% in that, because I've met Larry and Peter, who gets a few digs off Holt as well. I find the two guys to be absolute salt of the earth. And for anybody to meet and have a conversation with Larry and to think he's making stuff up, well, sorry, I don't think you're a very good judge of character. And, I think that Larry particularly has been treated very badly through all this. And I'd love to get Larry back on sometime soon. I know he's taking a bit of a break from the media at the minute. He's off Facebook, and it'd be good to see him back.
I'm sure he'll be back, and he'll be up. I've no doubt he'll be co-hosting with me in September. as normal. He's done it for the last 3 years. So I'm sure he'll be back again in September.
Well, September, we obviously can't do a 2-hour interview without mentioning September, because it's really the jewel in the UFO Truth Magazine crown, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, it's got, got a budget of about 11 grand, which is all paid for by the magazine subscribers. So that's all I do is plough the money back into that. We've got 6 speakers. Obviously, Travis Walton.
Wow.
The world's most famous living abductee. Making a very rare, I think he's only been to the UK once before, many years ago. So he's making a rare appearance. And for me, I met him in 2010 at the last World Conference, which was a week-long World Conference in Laughlin, Nevada, before it moved to Phoenix. And I'd always thought on documentaries he seems a very down-to-earth, common-sense kind of guy. No, not power gone to his head or anything, not become touched by notoriety, stroke fame. And when I met him, he was just an ordinary guy. No axe to grind, just a very straightforward, down-to-earth. And this guy is as honest as anybody. And of course, with my background as a detective and interviewing and psychological training in interviewing, there's nothing he said that raised alarm bells. And I think it's an outstanding case. And I'm just really pleased that he's agreed to come over because, I think to a certain extent, he doesn't make many overseas trips purposely. And he's agreed to come over. So I'm really delighted that he's coming. And I've no doubt that by the time of September comes along, we'll have pretty much be sold out. As it is now, we've sold about 60% of the tickets for both days. So we're looking at nigh on 600 people. So we're already like 400 or so tickets, 350 tickets sold for both days. So we're well on the way. I think we're probably 3 months up on where we were last year in terms of ticket sales for the September main 2-day conference. So I think as more publicity goes, and I've actually been putting some press releases out that should start coming online shortly about his visit, that I think we, with a bit of luck, we'll get some national media interest, because it's not very often the world's most famous living abductee comes to the UK. So I think we'll get a lot of coverage there. But tickets are selling, and I would encourage people to come along and book online through the magazine, UFOtruthmagazine.co.uk. Book online. You guaranteed to get your ticket if you book it soon. But I think there's going to be a lot of interest. What I will do is, like I did with Stanton Friedman last year, I will do a one-to-one interview with him on the Saturday, and then on the Sunday he will do his presentation on his case. So you'll get 2 bites of the cherry. So I think both will be interesting, and I'm really looking forward to it. Obviously, there's Nick Redfern, who we mentioned earlier. He's obviously the Brit who's coming back now, expat living in Phoenix, United States. So he's coming back. And then we've got Marcus Allen, who is kind of like a moon specialist, and moon anomalies, Mars anomalies. Well, when I saw him last year at the Glastonbury Symposium, at another event, and he said, I've got some new information on the moon and Mars. So I said, let's do a lecture then. Similarly, I'll tell you where it was. It was the Southend UFO conference last year, where Marcus was there, and also Andy Thomas. Now, Andy Thomas, I'd actually met him before at the Glastonbury Symposium, but I hadn't heard him lecture because I was outside, and as often you're at the vending tables, you don't get to hear the lectures. Yeah. This time at Southend, the vendors' tables are actually on the side of the room, so I heard all the lectures. And I would have to say he did an excellent lecture on conspiracies, general conspiracies, covering a whole manner of conspiracies. But it was such a good presentation that I straight away went up to him and said, look, would you do one, the same lecture with a few more UFO additions into the mix as the first lecture to kick off the 2 days, because it struck me that his lecture summed up everything we know about how the media doesn't work properly, doesn't tell the truth, whether it be, you know, archaeology, forbidden history, UFOs, the banks, you know, all those kind of things, military. There's all these kind of things out there, and his sources were impeccable, and I thought he did a really entertaining lecture, so I invited him, so he's there. And then, other than myself, there is Mike Freebury. Now, Mike Freebury wrote the book about the animal mutilations on Dartmoor, and it's a good book. But what I'll say is, I'm not going to say too much about what he's talking about. Suffice to say that I think you'll find it very interesting. It's new research that he's doing, and I'm going to leave it at that. A bit tantalising, but I have seen what this research is, and I think it's well worthy of being aired at a bigger venue. So that's all I'll say on that. But I think you'll be entertained by what his research is into. So I think it's well worth listening to what he has to say, put it that way. So as usual, I might try to get a surprise guest here and there. You know, I like to do something a bit different, build something in. We'll see on that, but because they're meant to be surprises, I'm not going to tell you who they are in case they don't happen for whatever reason. But, you know, I always like to have maybe one thing in the background as a bit of surprise. So we'll see what happens. But I've no doubt, you know, there's going to be tremendous buzz. And the thing is, what some of the feedback I got last year was, you know, some people said, well, you know, you got like 280 people per day last year. You know, why don't you maybe go to an even bigger venue, maybe 400 or 500 people? You might be able to fill that. And I said, well, maybe I could. I said, but they wouldn't have the infrastructure that Holmfirth provides, because with Holmfirth, everything is a matter on your doorstep. The pubs nearby, the cafes, the shops. It's literally just 50 yards, 100 yards away. So everything is self-contained in a very pretty little village. And I don't think that's worth losing, because, yeah, I might get a venue that's 500 seats. I might fill it, but there'll be nothing else around it. It'll be on some park somewhere, and that'll be just it. It'll just be a stadium somewhere, a large venue, and there'll be no infrastructure around it whatsoever. Well, that's no good. And one of the things that people keep saying to me is what makes Holmfirth so special is that because it's all self-contained, people are staying for the weekend. They're all in hotels nearby, and we kind of like take over the town. And seriously, a lot of the cafes say, "Oh, you're the UFO guy. Oh, great. Oh, I'm pleased to meet you. Oh, thanks. Yeah, we were packed out. We had your guys coming in and out for both days. So I'm bringing in trade into the town. So there's a bit of a buzz that weekend when they're on, and the pubs are packed. And people, one of the comments that often comes out to me is they say, what I love about Holmfirth is that we sat outside the pub till 1 a.m, groups of us.
Yeah. Because
we're all staying in roughly the same area, and it's that UFO community comes together for hours and hours, and you meet like-minded people. Well, other than during the actual conference or maybe at a tea break, you don't usually get that after effect where you can stay together. Everybody goes off the different ways. But because it's Holmfirth and it's all contained, it pretty much takes over the town. UFOlogy takes over this little town, and everybody's talking to each other, and people find new friends, common interests, common sightings, and they love it. Just chatting away. It's like the place to be in England and talk about UFOs. So a lot of people say how special it is, and of course one of the things that I also try to engender is kind of like a family atmosphere. And as you know from being there last year, the people that helped me were often based around my family. boyfriends, their partners, kind of thing. I've got 2 lovely daughters. They help. Their boyfriends help. Friends and helping out. It's a very family orientated group of people come together to make it work. And we give free biscuits away, cheap drinks and whatever, because it's not about making the money. It's about making people enjoy it and bringing people in together into one place for basically a whole weekend. It's a bit like going to Butlins, I guess. Butlins it would be quite a good analogy, that people get together in a confined area and they have these common interests and are able to talk and share experiences. And that's, really pleasing for me that those kind of comments filter their way back to me. And so for me, I don't think I'm ever going to take it away from Holmfirth because of that unique infrastructure. And it's not about the money. And if I can fill 280 seats per day because that's the maximum, then so be it. Now, this year is a little bit different, I would say, in the sense that unfortunately, we weren't able to rebook the Civic Hall because it looks like the Civic Hall is closing. And I had to you've got to book well in advance for something like this. So we're now at the Picturedrome. Now, the Picturedrome, for those people who aren't aware, who've never been, is actually a very popular music venue. It was an old cinema, I think 1910 or something like that. And it's now one of the most popular, I should say, B-circuit music venues. It's not the top, but it's the people who've been top. The B-listers, I guess, not the A-listers, but it's a very popular music venue, and that's the venue for this event. Now, it can hold 280 a day with seating, normally about 700 for if it's a stand-up music gig, but with seats, it's 280 a day. However, if we got to the stage of being sold out, we've got access to another 40 seats on one a side mezzanine and one an upper mezzanine. So again, we could possibly go to 320 a day. We've not been in there, so I'm sure it'll be a little bit different from the Civic Hall, but it's of a similar size, and I've no reason to think that it's not going to be anything other than a success. So I'm looking forward to it, and of course, what I really want is to find that permanent home. So I'm hoping that if all goes well, this will become the permanent venue for the 2-day magazine conference. And in time, we might go to 3 days, the Friday, Saturday, Sunday. In time, I would, because Holmfirth is a tourist place, because it's synonymous with the old classic series Last of the Summer Wine. It was all filmed in and around the town, so it's a very famous place for that, and it has a lot of tourists come in. The town has kind of always got a touristy feel during the summer months. So it'll have a film festival, a beer festival, an art festival, you name it, it has a festival. Well, I kind of toy with the idea of having a UFO festival. And maybe running events over a week with smaller venues, holding lectures on an evening, and perhaps having maybe we could get some buildings where we can put a history of the subject and have, and like an education side to it, little seminars, that kind of thing. So that's kind of one of my long-term projects. Is maybe eventually graduate to UFO, and that could be done possibly in association with the local council, because I know that the local council have an art week, so it's for the whole week. There's various events. They have a music week, so they've got various pubs who will have various gigs on throughout the week, and there'll be other information. So it's not impossible that eventually, especially if the people in the town and the businesses say, no, we like UFO Truth having their conference because we get lots of extra trade, that's going to encourage them to think, yeah, well, actually, this might be good for the town, because unfortunately, Last of the Summer Wine has ended. It's becoming a bit of a distant memory now. So they'll have to find new things to draw visitors in. So I think that's kind of where I would like to eventually see it. But we're building. This is the first year we've got a Southern Conference. Let's hope that that's a success. I've no reason to think it won't be, and that can become a regular Southern Conference venue. And again, people might say, well, you could double your revenue if you went to a bigger venue. But then I'd say, well, it's quite nice to have a stately home. It's quite nice for people to have free parking, nice grounds on a nice day, to have your cup of tea between the lectures. So, it's a question of what you want and where you want to take things. For me, it's never about the money. It's about putting on entertainment, making people, bringing in people off the street who are not so familiar, having the confidence to come to a place, enjoying it, learning a bit of the history, meeting some of the people involved, and basically wanting to put on a good, polished conference. And if you find a really good venue that works, then I don't think you should change it. Why change something if it works?
No, I think Holmfirth is a perfect home for it. And to be honest, it's so cool at night to be able to, once you've finished listening to the lectures, to go back to your room, freshen up, and go out, and everybody all meets up in the same place.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah, we were there till they kicked us out at the old Bridge Inn. Saturday night and Sunday night, and we went back to our. We were
take
staying
over, don't we? We take over.
Yeah, we were staying at the Nook. We were staying at the Nook across the road, and they stayed open for another hour or so afterwards. So we all adjourned over there. The ones of us that were still left and still fancied another drink and a yarn, and we went over there and carried on.
And you see, because this will now be the fourth conference. It'll be our third year, but it's actually the fourth conference. The local businesses are getting to know us and know the UFO community. They're not nutters, perhaps. And so there's a bit of a self-education going on there because, probably the first time they think, these nutters going to come here and whatever. But they see that we're ordinary people, just got an interest, like anybody else got an interest in another subject. And I think that, the businesses are now liking us. And they realise that it's good to have something different, bring in a new venture into the town, etc. So I think with each year that goes by, that we will hopefully grow and become more ingratiated into the town's culture, which is where I think that the people in the council who are perhaps maybe a bit wary at the moment because we're a strange subject, if they start to get feedback from all the businesses saying, you should have these, this is good, yeah, go for that, let's back this, let's do it. Because, what do? They have a Roswell week, a McMinnville week, where it's a whole week long of events. So in time, I don't see any reason why we can't do that.
Well, funny enough, the day after the last conference, the Monday morning, we'd been down to Scuffler's for a cup of coffee, beautiful coffee there, and we were telling them, did you get a good trade this year from it? Because we told them last year when it was coming up and that we'd notify them and all that. And we stopped at the greengrocer's to buy some... we bought a plant for a friend who we were going to visit. And Andrew at the greengrocer's was telling me... was asking us what we were doing in town. We told him. And we told him that they couldn't get the Civic Hall next year. And he said, get Gary to get in touch with me. I can sort it out for him. So apparently the control of booking was being passed to some other group or whatever, but I did pass the message on. I don't know whether it got to you, Gary.
No. I actually met with somebody who was possibly part of a consortium that were taking it on.
Oh, yeah.
But it hasn't actually happened, and there was no guarantees.
Oh, I see. So you could have been left out in the cold there.
It's like booking almost a year in advance. You have to literally make a decision.
Yeah.
But the beauty is, of course, you're talking about the Old Bridge Inn. Well, what's next? The Old Bridge Inn.
The picture drone. Yeah.
So it's so what a buzz we're going to have there. You ain't going to have to go far out of the conference to be in the bridge, are you?
No.
It's right next to it, so it's even better in some ways.
Okay, yeah, that's been absolutely brilliant, Gary. It's been always lovely talking to you, mate. And
thank you for having me on.
Look forward to seeing you down at Watford on the 30th of April. And good luck with that. I hope you get all the tickets sold in advance. And I do hope you'll come back on and talk to us again sometime soon.
Anytime you want me on, you just let me know.
That's brilliant, Gary. Thank you very much.
Good to meet you, Gary. I'll see you up in Holmfirth. If I can't sell a ticket if I'm out of time, when I buy one, I'll just come along and carry Andy's feathery hat.
Yeah, well, as the mastermind champion, he's the inaugural.
Exactly. He's got to defend his title. I'm going to be there, rubbing his shoulders and come and gene him up in his corner. Okay, you can take this.
I haven't told him that he's got to give the trophy back.
No.
Only joking.
No worries. Well, thanks ever so much, Gary. Thanks, Jason, and thanks to everybody for listening tonight. And we've got a little song to play you out with, and we'll be back on Tuesday. And we've got Lou Meg, who does some fantastic work with homeless people. She feeds them, and she gets given her food to do it by a local supermarket. So that'll be certainly worth listening. I hope you can join us 8 o'clock Tuesday night. Thanks, everybody, and good night.